When is powerful too powerful? Hello and welcome to the Delirium engine, where we talk serious about games of the imagination. I am your host, Brian Baxter, also known as Mekhalikhar, fresh off of his 10-second docs of his first and last name. With me here is my good friend Swampy.
Hello.
And my other good friend Ian, aka the Barrbarian, who, if I remember correctly, doxed himself hard last night on our very vigorous discussion about the unmentionable things in Dungeons & Dragons.
Yeah, I did.
I'd like to point out, just before I start, I noticed in the last episode, and maybe in the episode before that, we started talking about Dungeons & Dragons more than gaming in general. And this podcast is about games in general. It's not about DMing, it's about GMing. If that matters to anybody, just saying. So, as I said before, what we're doing right now is going through our rules for GMing, or rules for successful GMs. These are a set of rules, as I've explained in previous episodes, that I wrote in university, and we are going through them point by point and seeing how truthy or how good these rules are, or what our opinions are on this, in the hopes that at the end of all of these rules, we can sort of organize some sort of GM player manifesto for Dungeons & Dragons. So without further ado, I think we should get right into it and see what our topic for this week is. Rules for successful GMs. Rule number 6. Balance is inherent in storytelling. Breaking the system is never an issue. So I'm just going to go into, like we usually do, a little bit of background into what this rule means. The original rule, this one is slightly simplified, but the original rule was game balance is inherent in storytelling. It's okay to abuse the system because powerful people exist. But I think this one broadens the definition a bit more. And I think it sort of creates, it covers more ground than just characters, because GMs can abuse systems too, and you don't have to necessarily abuse systems with just characters. And I would say that the feel of the rule stays true even when you leave the realm of characters. So I will go to whoever wants to chime in first, either the Barbarian or Swampy. Does anybody have anything to say about this rule?
I think that I'm pretty, I don't know. Honestly, I think that if, I more or less need, I don't want to say examples, but I think I'd like to let Ian go first in this one to kind of gauge where we're at, so I can, fully understand the rule, if you want.
Okay. If not, I could sort of go into my thinking behind it, or at least what I understood it to be.
Just for my own clarification, when we're talking powerful people exist, well, I do agree powerful people exist, but are we talking in the realms of players starting a campaign, or are we talking like they've been doing this for a while and they're supercharged?
Okay.
And
all right, so what the rule is saying is when you have a character who breaks the rules, and everyone's played them or seen them played, like people who know the system better than other people find an exploit in the system and use it to their advantage. You know, anybody can do it. GMs can do it with their NPCs. Players can do it with their players. Now, when this happens, it creates one of two narratives, and really only two narratives. If you're actually going to basically look at the problem, quote unquote, that is an overpowered character. Narrative number 1 is this character is strong. And by strong, we mean that he has found some sort of technique that, or has been given an inherent gift that allows him to stand above the rest. So the story being told by this character, and like I said, the original rule is basically characters, but I think it can extend to everything. The original rule for this character, or the story for this character, is that he is a strong figure. He has done something, learned something, born with something that gives him an advantage over everyone else. Mm-hmm. The other narrative that it could create is the exploit is a commonplace exploit. For example, your super cool exploit that gave you all of these extra powers or whatever is something that's so good that any wizard or anything like that or town guard will have figured this out, and provided they can get to the level, like, provided your town guards get to the level where they achieve this exploit, I think the thinking behind this was starting level characters, because as you get further and further on in the levels, exploits become even less relevant, and I guess we can get into that later. But starting level characters, all the town guards will have trained this. They'll have learned these things. Like everything that you thought you were so clever for doing, the world will have already accepted that this is amazing and adapted. Right? They would have either adapted against it, or everybody would have it. So you wouldn't be special because everybody is special. Quote The Incredibles. So that's sort of the idea behind it. So if we want, let's go into the basic topic of the rule first, which would be starting characters, and then we'll talk about advanced characters, and then maybe we'll try to branch out beyond characters if we can think of something that works.
Sure.
So, do you have a better understanding of what we're talking about here?
Yes.
What do you think?
I think when I think of this, I think a lot of homebrew stuff that I've kind of ran into, even like done myself, where it kind of sets it sets one person apart from the rest of the party. I find that like me personally, when people have this like massive power curve because of like a super artifact or whatever, it's as a player, I sit there and I realize I'm like, okay, this is the Mary Sue of the party, or whatever you want to say. This is the individual that's like all powerful because of this artifact, etc., etc. But
or Gary Stu if he's male.
Or Gary Stu, yeah. But I don't necessarily find it problematic because, like you had said, like before, if it's in the game, it can be stolen, used against them, cloned, or whatever. So, if it's an item, if it's a person, well, that to me is also part of the challenge. I've ran into cases though where with players where I'd say not so much where they try to break the system, but they completely misunderstood. I was playing 4E with someone, and we were using D&D Insider at the time, and he ended up with 43. I noticed that. Yes, thank you. 43 AC at level, I don't even remember, but in that particular system, I think it was like Lolth and Orcus and all these other like deity avatars had a AC of like 32 or something. So I sat there and I'm like, okay, this is not a thing.
There's no way.
No. But the thing is that I think it's okay to be powerful as long as you're not cheating and you understand the system and you understand like, okay, this is why it happens. If it's in the system, if it's homebrew, obviously agreed upon between you and your GMs, and the GM has to say, okay, this is the item, or this is your little niche. What is the breaking point of it? Like how does this affect the setting? Things like that. So I think when you do something like that, you really need to understand, not so much I want to say the balance, but the kind of cause and effect of things. So
okay. So what you're saying then, as far as I understand, is that it can be an issue if you're not taking into account the balance of things.
I'd say more of it's an issue if the GM doesn't have an idea of how it is going to affect his or her game, and if there is no kind of almost rhyme or reason for it. I would also say like that's a lot of mainly pertaining, in my opinion, to items, because I find that items like having an artifact or whatever placed into the story or into the setting that really creates a power differential within characters. I think it's fine to some degree, but at the same time though, like it's a dangerous thing that if your players get a hold of it, they manipulate it, you can't be butthurt because they're going around using the orb of whatever to like completely decimate cities. You're the GM who put that in there. That is your mistake, your fault.
Okay, so we'll explore items after we've explored like starting characters and things like that. So I'll put that. I've written it down on our what seems to be our new itinerary.
Mm-hmm.
So I know there's one feat in 5th edition, and we'll talk about we'll use D&D as an example because other systems are either too unknown or I can't think of the examples off the top of my head right away. So in 5th edition, I know you have, Swampy, a personal distaste for the lucky feat. And this is a feat that any character can take pretty much at any level, provided you allow the use of feats, which I like to stress is an optional rule in that system. And in fact, the de facto standard is that it doesn't exist, which is why there are so few feats in their listing.
And that's a very good point. Like it almost kind of ruins the I feel like sometimes, like, this is just me and my personal grudge. It's just, I find like sometimes it ruins the like the idea of it being like somewhat of a game of chance or a game of like a game represented by stats and whatnot too. But then again too, like I've had people argue it with me and they've made a lot of like relevant points. Like it does have a purpose, it's explainable, etc. And to be honest with you, it is just probably me being crusty. But I think that it's something where I see it as, I'm like, well, I'm the one who allowed feats in my game, and people ask me, is it okay if I use this? I did not double check to make sure if this is something I actually wanted within my game, and now now everybody, I think like 2 out of 5 people in my party have it, and I sat there and I'm like, it makes it. I fear that sometimes it makes because it's a game of challenge, it makes it a little too easy for them. So that's where I find I'm like, I'm not necessarily. It's not a favored thing of the feat.
Lucky characters almost never critically fail.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? And where
if I could interject.
Yeah.
What exactly is the lucky feat?
You roll. You make a roll. And
when the ruling behind it is such bullshit too, like the official canon, like the rules behind it is such trash. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
So you're getting mad about this too.
I only hate it because the makers of the game are trash at writing books, and then they're trash at ruling on the trash they wrote. So not only now is their writing bad, but they're ruling on the writing. Like the only interpretation you can take from the book is wrong if you know how to read. So you have to go to their website and find their errata, essentially. And yeah, it's stupid. It's a stupid rule. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry, I'm interrupting because I'm a jerk.
You roll a d20. If you don't like it, you can roll a secondary d20 and choose whatever result you want. Now, the thing is that if you have advantage, so let's say you have advantage, you roll your 2 d20s with advantage. Say I got a 6 and a 5, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh crap, that's not very good, especially seeing I feel like I'm wasting the advantage. I use lucky, I roll a 3rd dice, and I could choose any one of those 3.
That's ridiculous.
And imagine you having disadvantage. Now I have disadvantage. I roll a 1 and a 20, right? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to take the lucky feat because I don't want the crit fail because I have to take it because I have disadvantage. Mm-hmm. You roll a 3rd dice, it doesn't matter what that dice is because the lucky says you can take any of the 3, so you automatically succeed by choosing the 20 at your disadvantage. So it's like a cop-out win is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and the way the book is written, it at least the way I interpreted the writing of the book, which to me is the I know how to read definition, is your roll with disadvantage is 1 roll, and your lucky roll is a 2nd roll. So the first roll in Swampy's example, the 1 and the 20, where you have to take the 1, if you roll the lucky die, you either take that 1 from your disadvantaged roll, or the lucky roll, which could be like a 6. And suddenly you didn't crit fail. And then the lucky roll makes sense. But in this case, what you've done is you've turned a disadvantage roll, because their official ruling is you can pick any of the 3, and you've just taken a disadvantage roll and turned it into a super advantage roll. You want disadvantage. You would literally, with your lucky feat, go, okay, do I get disadvantage for putting one hand behind my back? No? How about if I close my eyes? Yes, great, crit strike, win. I get 3 rolls to try now.
Yeah.
So like you gun for more dice with the easiest way possible, disadvantaging yourself. Because advantaging yourself is hard, but disadvantaging yourself, all it does is you just gotta close your eyes, fucking sit down and swing, do whatever, hold the sword the wrong way. Suddenly everything works great, and that's why it's so stupid.
This is just something you can take at level 1.
Yeah, it's a feat.
Yeah, feats get taken, I think, at level like 3 or 4 or something.
I think you can take it at level 1 as a human or something.
Yeah.
And the way the rules are written,
ridiculously overpowered.
Well, like let's say
if you take it by their official interpretation of the rules, yeah, it's stupid. It makes no sense.
Well, let's say range attack, they're prone, so you get disadvantage.
Yeah.
Right? Cool. They have disadvantage, but I have lucky, so I'm going to be able to take advantage of them being prone. Like Brian's saying, like you turn a disadvantage into super advantage because you're allowed to choose one of 3 rolls.
Yeah. And you can do this, I think, 2 or 3
What's the
times
drawback,
before.
though?
There's no drawback. You only have 3 of them before
Per day.
before a rest, a long rest or a short rest.
Well, I mean that makes it a little better, but
Yeah, but you can do other things too, like Luck Blade plus like other things like
there's a couple of things that allow you to do these.
see
get
that's
these
what
points.
gets me is things that stack like that.
Well,
And you can take more luckies.
Halfling plus Luck Blade plus Lucky plus I think there's like a halfling little feeder thing or something. So halflings get to reroll 1s.
Yeah.
And then you're like, cool, I can reroll 1s just in case, you know what I mean? So it's
And see, if I interpreted the rules, it would be you roll a 1 with a disadvantage, so you can re-roll that roll with disadvantage or something like that. And I didn't get a 1 that time, but whatever. They're not my rules. I don't care because I don't have any control over Wizards of the Coast, and I would just say that I would just use the book interpretation, not the shitty Wizards one if I was GM.
Yeah.
D&D. But let's talk about this because we all seem to think that this is a trash rule. So let's attack this trash rule and see if the rules for GMs can keep lucky, as it's intended without worrying about it. So in the game that we have lucky, did you, Swampy, did you ever think of using is it okay that the players can abuse that for your character? Like, has that ever ruined your game? Like, has it ever just ruined your entire
I've had to adapt to it, right? Where I've had to adapt to it and be like, okay, well, this is the thing. So let's create a logical let's create like a balanced encounter or a balanced series of challenges. The thing is though is that the person having say a super feat, having a super item, or having some homebrew thing that makes them very special or very different against the like versus the rest of the party.
Yes, I love homebrew stuff.
Well, I think my issue sometimes without thinking of without thinking of how it's going to affect the game, the setting, or the other members of the party is that it creates like this massive power differential, and you as a GM have to adapt to it, and that is fine. And I personally think it's fine to have these things that, though they do make me crusty, having them in there. You as a GM need to figure out how you're going to adapt to that with not creating a imbalanced encounter for the rest of the party that's specifically meant for the guy who has the this staff of like insta kill or whatever you want to say. And you got to those things are very, very important. The other idea is that, you know what, maybe there is a drawback. Powerful items and artifacts sometimes have powerful people seeking after them, more powerful than, say, the player. You end up having those things where you create this issue where it creates almost like a strife of man versus object, which is more powerful, the man or the object. You can call them out on that, like in-game. Not in the sense of you as like in real life person, but creating a dynamic where people believe it's the artifact more powerful than the person, or vice versa. Kind of like an individual people believe this individual is all powerful, meanwhile it's completely the implement. And does that create some type of stress on the character, etc.? So there's a whole bunch of ways you can do it, and it's like anything else, just get creative.
All right, so basically I asked the first question because if you didn't adapt to it, you'd be basically breaking rule 1, which was, your plot plot is crap.
Yeah.
And so, like, the overpowered character can never destroy your plot because your plot shouldn't exist in the first place. At least according... If you believe the first rule. Some people still don't. But if you believe that, then the overpowered character is telling the story of an overpowered character. Like, I'm really powerful and strong, and I've got great luck. Right? And the second rule that it sort of comes into is the system implies setting rule, which... I guess this rule in a way is an extension of that. But have you ever thought of basically... Because a feat... What is a feat in Dungeons and Dragons? It's like a skill or something that's inherited or acquired, right?
It's supposed to represent like your character. Like, it's supposed to represent your character's dedication to their craft, their training, things like that, or something even genetic.
So Lucky doesn't have starting character only, right? Like, this isn't something that you can only take as a starting character. Like, I remember back in 3rd edition or something like that, and I played a Ravenloft game, and there was feats like Redhead and things like that you could only take as a starting character. Like, that's one feat, you get it, that it can only be a racial feat or whatever if you get a feat.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool. But this one doesn't have anything like that. So doesn't that imply that this is a skill you can pick up? Like, luck is a skill.
Apparently, yeah. I was going to touch on that. As like, how do you train in luck?
Well, and that's a big question, right? And it's like, more or less, you'd have to be like, there's favored by the gods, etc., and other things like that are in the game that are still obviously not. Favored by the gods is something essentially earned.
You see what I'm saying though. Like,
Yeah,
if you can take this this feat that you hate, that we all hate, right?
Yeah.
But then suddenly you can create an entire back plot about it, which completely neutralizes it. Like, why wouldn't, like, if this was so special that any foible or slump or whatever, it's an inherited skill that you can learn. So why doesn't everybody just learn it? Because it's kind of amazing.
Well, why can't you give your monsters? Why isn't there like why isn't there a beholder with it? You know what I mean?
Well, why wouldn't everybody take it?
Yeah.
Like, or it would get to the point where basically every character would have lucky, and the characters who don't would just be at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
Like, everybody would just take it because it's so good. And you could also establish why. You could also establish some sort of like a school of like learning luck. You know, this you could be like fate magic or something, like a skill that like the real world doesn't have. But like, you could, like, obviously because this feat exists and you can inherit it, like, you could learn it. You know, someone somewhere must know how to do it.
Yeah.
Or you could pick it up.
Yeah,
that
like
being said, if
rhyme and
balance-
reason. Sorry, go ahead.
And that being said, I mean, if balance is inherent in not just storytelling but in the world, then why isn't there unlucky?
Yeah. Well, unlucky, because you can use lucky against people. If they roll well, you can lucky them and make them.
Why can't you unlucky people?
Why couldn't you?
Why
So if someone, like, that's the thing too, is like a person can lucky and another person can unlucky. So if you lucky and you get 3 dice and the guy says, in response, I'm going to unlucky you, now you have to choose the worst.
That's like a magical skill you trained in. It's you're like, ha ha ha, screw you. You're
well, yeah, but if that means he's rolling, like, you, if someone, it'd be first in, first out, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I roll my 3 dice, haha, crit. And he's like, nah, unlucky. Or like, I'll use my lucky to make you have to re-roll that. Like, roll an extra die, and I will choose the worst, the one you rolled. And the guy would be like, no!
And how does that stack up?
Well, that would be 4 dice. It'd be first in, first out.
Well, and you could have a situation too where this individual has no idea where their luck's coming from, and eventually one point it's a debt owed to something.
Yeah, you could do that too, like that. But that's the thing, where it's like the balance, the storytelling aspect of the game, I guess, would be where the balance comes from. You have to take into account something unbalanced like this. The 2 easiest ways are, yes, this is a powerful character. His story is about how cool and powerful he is. The other story is that he is not a powerful character, and that everybody has this. The clopping is Jazz the dog, who seems to be wanting attention, but nobody's giving it to her because she doesn't need it right now. And we have like laminate floors, and she's got doggy claws.
Sorry, Clomp fans.
Clomp fans. But yeah, like, I guess other approaches could exist too for that. Like you said, you could have what were you saying? Like, you could have disciplines devoted to this. You can have people devoted to like counteracting it. Like, I guess in theory you could make like magic items that like counteract lucky, like pretty easily. Like, this is
But
just
then all you gotta do is avoid those magic items.
yeah, but like, somebody might have it where it's like, no, I don't want someone taking that lucky shot. Like, every king in the world would have like a ring of no lucky. So like, when they poke their head, When they poke their head out of the palisades to see how the battle's going, an arrow doesn't just poke them in the eye and kill them instantly.
A ring of no lucky.
I don't know. But even still. But yeah, going back to starting characters, and let's assume lucky. Is there anything else that we can think of that might cause? Actually, my notes here, just rereading them again. So one powered character versus a rest of the party of non-powered characters. Is this a big problem, or do you think these non-powered characters might be able to shine in other ways?
I think it allows them almost to... They have to think more. They have to think more outside the box. They have to... Because obviously, they don't want to be outshined by the other player. They want to have their limelight. And you know what? I think having a situation, too, where, like we had mentioned before in previous episodes, the struggle also makes the story. The idea... I would hate to play a character that I'm able to run through everything, no problem. It would be very boring for me. The idea of no struggle as a player would almost just drive me insane. That's why, when I sometimes design a character, a lot of people go for optimal character design, etc. I don't, because I come up with a concept and then I find what best applies the numbers to it and just kind of go from there. But that's just how I design. That's how me personally how I play. When I see a character though that there is a big power differential within the party, well, you know what? You put him in a situation where he thinks he's gonna win the day. You put him in there, and it turns out he doesn't. Then the other characters have to save him. You make him more humble, things like that, and that's the turning point. Because one of the things I sometimes like to do is not only kind of psychologically play the characters as a GM, but also the players. When you sit there and you're running around with a shotgun when everyone has sticks, you think you have advantage. That's all well and good up until the day you find out you're not, and then your world comes crashing down all around you. So setting up those situations too, where people almost get scared, they get re-humbled. I think those are great situations to have, and that's how I'd settle that.
So that would be how you would say that the balance would be inherent to storytelling.
Yeah.
A person who's overpowered will realize that they're overpowered and stop worrying about danger, right up until that point where the balance reasserts itself and he realizes that dangers are real.
Yeah.
My issue with this is if you have the party where the balance of power is off, and you're just trying to humble this player, and you keep throwing bigger and bigger stuff at him. Eventually that's going to take him out, and if he's been doing all the work to take down the threats that you've been throwing at him, the party's not going to be able to save him.
Well, that's fine. And you know what? That rocks the party. And let's say you have your crazy paladin and your four other players. Your paladin dies, and you know what? The parties end up having this big shock and awe. The parties either run away, and if they do clean up, the party will realize they can do it. And the paladin who died realized that, you know what, maybe next time he plays a game, he should really think about what he's doing and not necessarily...
Maybe
that's not what I'm getting at, though.
Exactly. Civilization about
what I was getting at more
character.
is this threat that now took down the paladin is just going to destroy the rest of the party.
Well, and that's the thing, though, is that's where it kind of comes with a counterbalance, because the thing is that, challenge ratings are a thing, sitting there and thinking about maybe necessarily outs or certain things around in the environment that maybe assist the other members that are not so powerful. Maybe they do have to escape. Maybe you give them that chance of escape. So then they realize that they need to avenge their friend that was all powerful. Let's say their Goku character dies, and the rest of the party's like, wow, we haven't done anything for a very long time. We need to do something. They go and they train, or they arm themselves up, and they don't feel confident. And then one day they run into the dragon once again, and they kick the crap out of it, and they realize that they themselves are their own heroes of the story. And you know what? The paladin lives forever in memory, which is honestly probably the most you can ask for in a game of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, but how long is this going to take? Because, like you said, if the players are sitting there being like, well, I haven't done anything in a long time, I mean, as a player, I would just quit. I'd be like, well, screw this, Garagnak, the super cool's got it.
Yeah, well, that's kind of like the last episode I was on where we talked about the paladin who creates a like the NPC paladin like shouldn't be as cool, or in this case he was cool, so it creates that strife. The thing is though is that as a GM, I would even openly say, I'm like, how does your character feel knowing full well that he's essentially almost a squire in comparison to this knight, right? And doing those things, then like giving them those line blights, giving them essentially character build and things like that.
Don't even ask him how he feels. Just start calling him a squire. Well, see what happens there.
And that's kind of
your squires are with you, Sir Paladin.
And that's where it kind of plays the players, right? And then sometimes though those squires might just Caesar a guy and stab him to death in his sleep.
You hamstring him and then you throw him off a cliff.
Yeah. Like it ends up being like the whole Scar Mufasa thing where the one day he falls off a cliff and you're not going to save him because
I guess alternatively as a GM what you could do is sort of prepare one encounter. Like I'm assuming now we're talking about characters for some reason that are so absurdly different. Like I can't even imagine a character that overpowered that the other characters are functionally irrelevant.
And see,
maybe in second edition
games
where there's no
where it's
ECL.
Like that.
Yeah, I know there's some like roguish like assassin type characters that can do real nasty shit because they're basically unattackable. So
yeah,
they can be like come in, swing, do like 1 trillion damage, frickin' just like poof out, escape, and then come back for the second round, and like all the other players can just sit there and watch this happen for like forever. And maybe that's the example I can think of. But even then, at some point in time, someone's going to roll that crit 20 and see them, and that's where shit's going to go real bad.
Well, it's not even necessarily the crit 20. Sometimes it becomes situational. Sometimes it's the person's ego that ends up being the downfall because they're
and that's the balance that we were talking about. But in that situation, as a GM, wouldn't it be a solution? I guess just thinking about this to basically produce more obstacles for the players who have their dicks in their hands while the other guy looks really cool. It's like, okay, you're the Paladin's fighting his Baelor or whatever, because we're still talking about starting level characters or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe we've sort of advanced to advanced characters here, but like we've got the OP character, right? And he's fighting his Baelor, and everybody else is fighting Vrox.
Yeah.
Right.
Not if you think of the party as a unit.
Yeah, but he's so overpowered. Like in this example that you've given us, is like he's so overpowered that when he dies, whatever he's fighting get like raffle stomps.
Yeah.
Like the rest of the party. And so maybe the party has to deal with Vrox, and they're just like, oh shit, he's losing. Now they have to help him.
No, I'd bail out.
It's like how much
not your character though. Your character would bail out.
Straight up, I'd bail out.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the story though. And I think that's okay. Like that, there's nothing wrong with that. And if the paladin, like if the party has no loyalty to this paladin, like let's assume he's an overpowered character, but the characters like him. Like there's like, yeah, he's overpowered, but it's a great character. He's personable. Like everybody thinks it's an awesome character, and we want to help. They might the challenge might be, how much resources can we devote from us to help him, because we know that if he goes, we go. If the Baelor or I guess it would be Baelor. The Baelor, wins. He's going to come for us. So, send the mage or whatever. We can handle the Vrock until he comes. And it would be vice versa, right?
Yeah, I see what
so
you're saying.
you can have this balance, like this interplay, and that would be part of the story too, I think. And then, like, as characters become more powerful, I guess you could probably see more instances where the overpoweredness becomes more of a factor. So, early games, you could see like these really strong characters, like a guy who could kill like 10 goblins and not break a sweat. But in late games, can basically kill 10 Baelors and not break a sweat while everybody's having trouble with one. Like I could see like a really experienced player being able to, fashion a character that way, where everybody else is just like, I'm a ranger. I took ranger as the class. Whereas the other guy's just like, I got that ring that gives me lightning damage, and then I turn into a shambler or something, and they get bigger every time they take lightning damage. And, like, I don't know, some ridiculous exploit that they use to become overpowered. You hear people talk about them all the time.
Well, just to touch on that, like as a GM myself, my one rule is if I can't find the source material that you're pulling off of, then it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I don't play with extra books usually. Yeah. If you want it, make it yourself.
Yeah.
and I'll approve it. I'd rather see homebrew shit than
generally
Wizards of the
won't approve
Coast
it.
garbage, because it literally is garbage. They don't do anything. The only reason why people think it's valuable is because it has a hardcover at the end of both ends of the pages, and you have to buy it for $60, which forces people to think it's valuable. But it's all trash, made by trashy people who write trashy rules. Like, I'm sorry, it's just garbage, and you always have to write this. They always write this garbage, and people always get these big D&D boners over it because they're like, wow, my new, arcane sorcerer rogue will really benefit from this prestige class Arcana rogue, and it gives me all these cool powers like invisible hypnosis bolts or whatever. That's some horseshit, right? Some random horseshit has nothing. The 10th level character or whatever decides to take that, and suddenly that 10th level that 10th level of fighter that the other player took, becomes stupid in comparison. Yeah. Now, in terms of the storytelling, I don't think that this is a problem at all. I think the invisible hypnosis bolts that the frickin' Arcana Rogue or whatever stupid prestige class is just another notch in the story. Obviously, the fighter's going to start feeling a little bit inadequate, and that's part of the tale. Bob the guy who uses a short sword and a buckler is looking pretty stupid compared to Inviso Rogue, who can shoot invisible hypnotic bolts. And the guys are like, wow, those are, if you were a practical character, you'd just be like, those invisible hypnotic bolts are pretty good. You know what? Keep doing that. That's great. We're winning real easy this way. And then maybe the whole party would eventually adopt this whole, we really rely on invisible hypnotic bolts.
Yeah, and then he dies, and then they all die.
Yeah, well, maybe they gotta try harder to keep him alive, because now they're crutching on him.
Well,
and that's also the story.
And see, that in my mind has become a story of keep Arcana Rogue alive and not actually fight.
Yeah, but they obviously have a goal. It's not just these people don't just go out into the field to fight monsters like in a video game. Hopefully, audience. And they have motives of their own, and so it just happens that invisible Arcana Rogue or Hypno Bolts is a way of lubricating their path to their goal, which they all seem to be interested in.
I hear you, man.
I think, just speaking about this, what these system breaks do, for sure, because this rule has covered about 3 or 4 different rules. Just the only one that I don't think it's touched on, at least slightly, is the sex and rape rule, and I'm sure we'll get there at some point in this one. But
not again.
But it's touched on everyone, and so it leads me to think that maybe this rule, the imbalance in systems, what it does is it accentuates the flaws in your use of the other rules, or lack of use of the other rules. So, for example, if you're trying to tell a story, and your story is about a struggle against a dragon, and then Mr. OP Lucky Luck character with his invisible hypnobolt shows up, and he's like, dragons? That's for fruitcakes. Wow, your dragon's a fruitcake, and I eat them. And the GM's just like, this story is stupid, and I hate it. You made a stupid character. That's on the GM. Rule 2, setting, the antagonist, what was it? Setting system, or no, what's rule 2?
Setting is irrelevant.
Oh yeah, your setting is irrelevant. The details of your setting is irrelevant and brook much tampering. Well, there you go. So you're holding your pearls of your setting, and invisible Hypno Rogue shows up, breaks everything, kills the king, sets fire to the kingdom, and is all like, "Kingdoms are for fruitcakes. Now your kingdom is one, and I eat it." And you go, shoot.
See, and then in this instance, I mean, it just sounds like the player you're describing doesn't actually want to be a player. They want to be the GM.
Well, some players play for stats, right? Everybody knows they like to play math games. They like part of what makes D&D interesting is it plays to different types of players. Some players play for the hard role play, and those guys don't care what their stats are because they're going to hard role play that shit.
Yeah.
Some people play for the hard stats, and they don't give a shit about their role play because it's the hard stats that matter, and a story just facilitates how cool their stats are.
And that's
And then there are some people in between that kind of go after it. Yeah, and yeah, you might think that's dumb, but they love it. They'll those players, those ones that play to the rules like that, they're the ones who will pore over those horseshit books for 16, 20 hours, like, in a day, just to find that one sentence that lets them exploit the whole system. And I don't know, having tried to like playtest a game system myself, they're very invaluable for that. Mm-hmm. And I thank you to the one who does that because he's really great. But anyway, with that said though, like some people really get off on that. They really like it, and far be it from me to say that your super cool strong character can't be super cool and strong. But, you know.
I mean, that's fine. Have a super cool, strong character, but now you have put it in my mind that I'm going to find a way to kill that super cool, strong
And that's
character.
okay. Because that's your story.
And
those are the hurdles.
I'm going to make you real salty about it while I'm doing it.
That's fine.
I always think about...
Also part of the roleplay.
I always think about, like... And not to branch off into other nerddoms here, but, like, I always think of Superman. And people always, like, high talk him, but... I don't know, a lot of story arcs, he always ended up getting socially manipulated, socially destroyed. Yeah. There's sometimes where he's been physically destroyed. He has lost battles. Like, it's... I think that's an interesting thing, is having a character that is incredibly strong, man of the people, and then him basically just being socially destroyed if someone were to... Like, if I was a player, if I was, say, like, a lawful evil... character, and I had a lawful good paladin, and he was going around doing his thing, like feeding the orphans, slaying the dragons.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, well, this man is suspicious of me and in my way. I am going to socially destroy him because I am a weak halfling bard, and I'm not in the mood to have a fight in a realm I'm going to lose in. But however, social manipulation is going to be my thing. You can wreck that character that way. It's not just like physical death. There's the idea of a social death too. Yeah. Like you eventually just make him an outcast of the kingdom or something.
Yeah, and that kind of assumes that all things are sort of equal too. Like combat is somewhat equal to social and academic. I guess other pursuits, and it's not always the case in every system, but yeah, there's always a way around it, right? You could always, like, the paladin might need to sleep unless he doesn't, but there's always something that they're going to need, right? Well, if he's an elf, he can probably change his gender now, and he can also not sleep, and he probably flies now because I'm sure there's fly elves somewhere. There's so many different types of elves. It's stupid. I'm sure someone can find an elf that's like does exactly what their fanfic character wants. They want it to do. It's like they look like Harry Potter except with pointy ears, and they fly, and they can produce umbrellas. I don't know.
I think that would actually be the worst thing for one of my characters.
Harry Potter?
Like, well, imagine a DM game where people... well, kind of going back to the last episode I wasn't a part of. Make a game where you your goal is to inadvertently turn everyone's characters into part of a fan fiction, and then watch everyone just be like try to like coast away.
That's too funny.
And they would just get like, they're like, no,
horrible.
No, I'm not.
Try to ship all the characters together.
Yeah, you're all in a sauna. Look at one another, and you're...
Who's got the largest thingy?
Man,
that would be so brutal. I would
That'd
be
be
like,
a horrible
guys,
game.
can we not play this game now?
I'll tell you what, it's
actually, you know what? I'd just be like me.
It's gonna be a super cool guy.
Or I'd be like, I've got
the
the
largest thing.
Yeah.
I'd be like, I got the smallest one. It's tiny. It's a micro peen.
He may have the biggest thing, but if you ask him the right questions, he will not be wanting to talk about it, and there you win your social battle.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right. You play truth or dare.
As an interesting point, actually, when I used to run games in D&D, like in third, at the university, I would tell players that they can play any level from 1 to 10. Just pick the level. You're all in the party. You're all together. But just pick whatever level you want. And I've had people like they're like, okay, I'll be level 10, and other people are just, yeah, we'll just be level 2. Usually, people at the time they liked 2 to 3 because it lets you produce a multi-class build. because some of them like being fighter rogues or whatever.
And I'm assuming they wanted the challenge, like the low-level people?
Yeah, because a lot of the players, they were fairly experienced, but you also had some of the players who weren't, or some of the players who liked power gaming, so they'd be like, yeah, I'll be level 10. It's like, okay, you can be level 10. And usually what happened is within the first 2 sessions, those characters died. Because they would run rough of the town guard or something like that, and it's just like the town guard's greatest weapon, the whistle, gets blown, and more town guards start coming in, and, you know, they're not used to their character, and the character gets killed, and all the other characters are like, we're not with him.
No, and you see that's another point that I don't like about power gamers is they think they are the authority.
Yeah.
Which they're not.
Yeah.
And it broods on suicidal for the party at times, because it's like, what do you mean we can't do this? I'm just going to do it. Fuck you guys.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to listen to the party, because like if anyone disagrees with them there's going to be player killing, and which brooks much sadness.
It's not good. That's actually one of the rules for players, is about player killing.
Don't kill players.
It's like a last resort.
Yeah.
Is really the rule. It's like after all other avenues have been exhausted, you should, because it's not really bad storytelling, so to speak, but it's just bad sportsmanship because it is a game. So just because, you know, XYZ says
just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, and that's where it is. The rules for players are a lot less. They're a lot more fed. Like they have a much lighter touch.
Oh, looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, we're on what, rule 6? So next week is the last rule, and then we're on to rules for players, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do from there. I have some ideas, but whatever. Okay. Moving forward on what we were talking about. So we talked about starting characters a little bit. Not as much, but it expanded into large characters, sort of what some of the problems can be with an overpowered character. But even then, those problems, you know, with a little bit of finagling, just sort of an acceptance of what is rather than what you want, you can sort of cope with any overpowered characters. But items are a bit different. And let's go into the outside of a character, because I think we've sort of hammed the discussion on characters. I'm sure if we rewatch this, we could pick apart what was going on.
Yeah, of course.
And figure out sort of what we're talking about here. But beyond characters, the first thing that comes to mind, like Swampy was saying, was items. So the guy has his, you know, occult book of ultimate power that summons all the evil gods that he wants, that do his bidding, or whatever the hell ridiculous item it is. How is this bad? How does this imbalance destroy the story or ruin your story, provided you are following the other sort of guidelines, the rules, I guess?
To branch off before we go on with the discussion, are we talking items they have procured in other campaigns and brought to yours, or are we talking items you've given them?
Let's say let's go with one then the other. So let's go with imported items. You know, we're playing in a multiverse. I come in from, you know, the land of high magic, and I bring in my wand of wonders, and I'm importing my character. And he's 16th level and has a wand of wonders. Let's start this game.
I'd say that's at GM's discretion.
Yeah, obviously.
I would be like, okay, well, what you got? Because I want to review what you have. And I'd be like, yes, no to this, and yes, no to that. And I'd go for them from there on that. Because, I mean, I don't want to be a stickler about things.
Yeah.
But, like, if you're bringing in a homebrew item that some other GM made up and gave you, and you just have it now, and it, like, when you ring the bell, you become 12 feet tall, and you can just kick over cities.
That's an item in 2nd edition, actually.
Great.
Fun fact.
That sounds fantastic.
It's a potion. It's sweet.
It's a potion of Colossus.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I'm talking like homebrew. If someone gave you this item, and you become the world, and you just kick over cities, and you're like, screw it, I'm real good at everything. I'd be like, no, you don't get that item here. That's some other GM's item.
Yeah, that's the sort of pre-game too, right? Like if the guy's like, I want to play this, it's like, this item's ridiculous. But let's assume, because the discussion doesn't really work if you just say, I don't want it.
Yep.
I don't want the overpowered item. So let's assume somehow he's got it. You accepted it. You didn't read it. Who knows what?
Well,
and
that's
it's here.
Fault on you.
Yeah, I know. But like, how does it ruin your game?
No, you just got to work around it.
Okay, so it doesn't. So, and do you feel that the game, like the way you work around it, is The story is going to be told about this guy with an overpowered item.
If you got this potion of
Colossus.
of Colossuses or whatever,
Colossi.
is that correct?
Yeah.
That sounds correct. If you got a potion of Colossi, maybe I've altered my game and you're not in human towns anymore. You're in Colossus towns.
Well, it could
Now
be.
you can't knock it over because it's your size. Until your potion wears off, then you're tiny. Now what's your beef?
Yeah, you come from another world. Yeah, everyone here, all the starting characters, they're all Colossi.
Everyone's a Colossus.
Yeah.
So
and you're
what now?
tiny.
You drink your potion, you become normal size for a day and a half, and then you're small again? How you
Sounds
feel?
good.
You want to go in the sauna now?
I would. I'd go in the sun.
That's actually kind of interesting. I like that. But yeah, like assuming...
You can alter small details like that.
Yeah, you can actually.
That's nothing.
Especially if you're importing characters. It's like, yeah, turns out that everybody in our world is Gulliver,
Yep.
and you're all the little T's or whatever they're
That's a
called.
go. That's a go.
Or little lights, or I don't know what they're called in that book.
The borrowers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that would also work. So, okay. That example aside, I'm guessing we're pretty much in agreement about this idea that's like someone gets an overpowered item, as a GM, you can just work around it, and that's part of the story, and that's okay. Like, it doesn't... The game doesn't break right up until you as a GM, believe that this game is unsalvageable.
Yeah. That, and I might actually contact the GM who supposedly gave them this item and be like, hey, is this real?
Yeah.
Give them this. Because, like, if they're just looking through Mekhalikhar's wonderful
Book of awesome enchanted
stupid
stuff
dumb thing, and they're just picking out, I actually got this from the Orc Queen when I sired 12,000 children with her, and I also have this army with me. And
nice.
I'm going to be like, okay, who is your GM and what does he look like? Because I'm going to go talk to him now.
Well, I think it's also nice, like, if you're crossing a character from one campaign to another, also just kind of knowing the flavor of the campaign and what that character's also been through,
Yeah.
And also, like, how this item was used, how it was manipulated, how the GM dealt with it themselves. Like, yeah, I think that's a really good idea where you kind of have that, okay, but then you get an idea, too, of also what the player was used to. Like, if they felt like they had free reign of using this to a certain point and the game just kind of ran amok, then, yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Or I've even run into things where I've given characters items from past games that I've had, and then they play that character again. They're like, hey, do I still have this super cool Dwarven Hammer? And I'm like, hell yeah, you still have that super cool Dwarven Hammer. And then just the way of getting around that is I've just broken it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something broke.
Yeah.
Something happened.
Yeah.
Crit fail, it breaks.
You crit failed, it smashed the
You've
mountain
got it
down, but it also
temporarily,
smashed the hammer.
But now you got to go on a quest to fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a way of dealing with it. Like, I don't think in any way this rule covers how you deal with the imbalance.
No.
But the idea is you can always deal with the imbalance in the story. Like, the writing of the rule might actually change a bit. Like, at the end of the day.
Think about it. Just don't just quit.
Yeah, I think this rule seems to be like the overarching theme of this rule is anything that breaks your system is not important. Just don't let it break you as a GM. Like, you just look at it like with some logic and reason, and you can always take the story in a different way. Whether it's the two ones that I pointed out earlier, like, this guy's powerful, we roll with it, or this thing is commonplace, we don't roll with it, or, this is a temporary gain that you'll have and somehow I'll nerf it. I would argue, though, as a GM, and I don't think this is actually any rules anywhere, but I wouldn't, like, hamstring a guy. Like, if this is, like, a feat or something like that, don't hamstring him and just be like, oh yeah, you lose your feat. Like, that's an example of, I would say, the GM getting defeated, and then trying to basically rules one, or almost like a reverse
They're trying to save face at that point.
Yeah, like they're trying to make their characters cooler by destroying one of the player characters, because their characters can't cope.
Yeah.
So he has to hamstring and take away your cool power. So, and that's just a sign of defeat of a GM. And what it does is it fosters distaste from the player, and you end up with a sort of drama conflict. Like, the player will either back down, I would say, and just be like, well, he's an ass, and I guess I'll play with him, but he's an ass and I hate it. or he's going to double down next time and make it even worse and worse and worse until eventually, that GM just doesn't want to play with you anymore, and then you'll just be like, well, he's a shitty GM. Like it's just you're gonna end up with tension, and you're gonna create the tension.
Wins.
Yeah, nobody wins in the end, and this rule is really just about GM mindset towards their characters, and it's really just once again almost your characters like this one sort of. I went through it, like the ones I missed, the rules that I missed. Like this one really does accentuate the other flaws if you're not adhering to those rules, and every time. If you feel that character is overshining everything, just try to find an elegant way to incorporate it into the story, into the narrative that's being produced here. Not to say that you're creating a story, but like into a way that the party goes in. Whether it's add a couple of monsters that are weak so that the party can deal with it, or add a strong monster. Like you might have, like if you do the strong monster and the weak monster, the big guy be like, I'll take the weak guys, you take on the big guy, and then the weak guys all die. The big guy's left alone, and it's like, well, I guess you're stuck fighting alone against the big guy and what's left of the weak guys if you haven't killed them all yet.
You done fucked up, friend.
And all your friends are dead. Either we continue the story or we start a new game. Yeah. Let's not screw up next time. Or all your players can make new Squire level players to hang out with you because you have to pick up a bunch of pugs. Enjoy, and that might be like, that might be a good story. But once again, this is like rolling with this punch. It seems to be what this rule is all about. I think the same with the items. Like barring some sort of importing items from other games. You're the one giving out those items.
It's true.
Think about what you're giving out.
Yeah, and then even then, just roll with it. Like, well, items are the same thing. It's like Swampy mentioned. Items can be stolen, broken. They can be misused. Like, once again, that might be the story too. The guy gets Frostmourne. Frostmourne's OP, and he becomes a monster as a result of it, or whatever. Or maybe it will. Like, the item is so powerful that it might produce conflict all on its own. So. This guy's got the one ring to rule them all. He's using it. All the other players are like, wow, that one ring's pretty good. Can I use it for whatever my goals are? And the other guy's like, no, this is my precious. You can't have this. And then next thing you know, they're all hitting each other with rocks trying to kill each other. Who knows? It could be anything. Or the one ring develops a consciousness and starts telling him things, and he has to be like, no, this ring's overpowered. I've been using it for such evil things that it's becoming evil.
Well, yeah, because like the Uncle Ben rule applies. Great power, great responsibility, etc.
Yeah. Or conversely, you've been using it for good so much that it becomes a paragon of virtue. It develops intelligence and forces you to adhere to its paragonness. And you're like, but I want to steal things. It's like, that would be wrong. I can't let you do that.
Why don't you just purchase this instead?
Well, that's why sentient items are so...
We will do good and make much gold so that you can purchase things.
Exactly. Well, I had an artifact in one of my games where the things it did were it created conflict between the players and that particular player. It gave the player story. It also caused it did make him a bit more stronger and have like effects in the world. But it did things like sent essentially a witch hunter after him because it was like black magic. It created strife within the party, like I stated.
This is the game with the book.
This is the game with the book, and yeah. And he would have, when that witch hunter came a-calling, he would have died very, very easily because that was his job. And if the party didn't intervene, then the guy with the artifact would have been essentially completely obliterated.
And then we also had that. I remember that particular game. We had a session entirely devoted to basically fixing his confused state as a result of this book that he had.
Yeah,
and that created a character growth. So
it did.
The character became, quote, less interesting, unquote, but it grew as a character because it wasn't some scattered nonsense character. It became a character with drive and loyalty and all these other things that were actually valuable in a party situation, and not some weirdo who just, on the whims of X demon or Y god, was trying to poison the other players behind their back and being a wacko.
Yeah, so it created... I don't know, it almost hit on certain things where I don't want to say there should be rules for like artifacts or whatever, but if you can do it where if there's a power differential, then it creates strife that the other players have to deal with, because it's not just the person wielding the artifact story. It's everyone else's story too to deal with. So,
all right. So I think we've sort of covered most of the ground here. I can't think of anything. Does anybody have anything else they want to add, or we'll just move on to sort of closing comments? So why don't we? I'll start, and then I'll let the other two go. I guess the closing comments is this is a rule that exacerbates the other rules, and this seems to be fairly on point, but maybe the wording is not the best. But what the sort of feel of the rule is that you as a GM need to roll with the punches, and don't let a character's excellence or lack of excellence deter you from basically using their overpoweredness to your advantage for producing a fun and enjoyable story for everybody, including the characters who aren't overpowered. Let this just be another part of the narrative that these players are creating and you are facilitating. Swampy, how about you? Closing comments. Do you have anything to add?
Not really. I think that if I think you can take any situation that may seem overpowered, and as a GM, completely mold it to your advantage. And that advantage being create a impressive narrative and help guide the players through this, and even help facilitate. Say, for example, if someone wants to remove this item, remove this player, guide them in a certain way, manipulate them. Converse with the people who are maybe feeling a little bit like they're not getting the limelight, and figure it out from there is really what I would suggest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Barbarian.
I got nothing.
You got nothing.
Balance is the key to a happy lifestyle.
Yeah.
More sauna scenes.
Yep. And as we said, balance is inherent in storytelling. So as long as the players are producing an excellent story as a result, then it all balances out in the end.
Yeah.
And yeah. So I guess with that said, I think we'll end the show here. So everybody who's watching, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Going for that 10 subscriptions. Boom. Buy the merch. There's no merch. But everybody, you all take care. Have yourselves a great night.